My name is Irene Church, and I'm the host for this fascinating session on creating connections, building relationships in the online learning environment. And Danielle Savory Seggerson will be our presenter, and so I'm just going to turn it over to her. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. Everyone, I'm Danielle. I'm a professor at Lansing Community College in the Development and Early Education Department, and I'm glad that you're here today. I see a few of you have popped in the chat already, but if you could just let me know your name and also the program that you teach in, just to see the variety of folks that are signing in today. Oh, someone from the UP. Welcome, Rick. I'm glad that you're here. What kind of programs are represented? I'm kind of an outlier at Trends, being an early childhood person, but I know we often have people in welding, we have people in nursing, business, all kinds of things. So like many of you are doing, I encourage you to use the chat. Oh, great, we got some medical assistant folks, wonderful. So I encourage you to use the chat to share your ideas, to ask questions of me. And I also popped in the chat a handout. So I encourage you to explore the handout either kind of while I'm talking, because I'll reference some of the resources, or after the presentation. So like I said, I am somebody who is from child development, and I have studied over the course of my career human development. And I wanted to offer you a way in which that I think about education, and a way in which that I wanted to frame this presentation is the ecological model by Bronfenbrenner. And this is a pretty famous human development model where we're looking at a child or a student or a person, not just in that educator and student relationship, but within multiple systems. That we know that our students come to us and they don't live life in a vacuum, that their families, lives, their neighborhoods, their communities, the time in which we live, we're living in a pandemic right now, the resources they have access to, some of them come to us with trauma, and we know all of those things impact them as people and therefore impact them as students in our classroom. And so in thinking about ways in which to connect with our students, we need to think about them kind of in a more holistic way through these various systems. And it might be useful to think about the kinds of students that you work with in your programs, because it's very unique to where you are located geographically and how your college is set up. So for example, in my program, I tend to have kind of a mix of some first generational students, some not. I have this really interesting blend of ages. So I have some folks fresh out of high school, and then I have some folks who are returning to college who have taken a break for 20 or 25 years. I also have a blend of people who are kind of green in my field, meaning they've never worked in a classroom, and then some folks who are pretty well seasoned and are coming back for a credential. And so all of this matters because of the ways in which that I want to plan with connecting with them, helping them to connect to one another, and also in thinking about the prior experiences that you're bringing to the table. I also want to offer you this visual here. This is from Flower Darby, who wrote the book Small Teaching Online, and you'll hear me reference her book because she's somebody that I really admire and has really studied this and has some really great tips. But these are the ingredients of a successful online course. And today I'll be talking about elements that you can blend in an asynchronous course or a synchronous course presented in the online learning environment. And what I like about this kind of Venn diagram here is that Flower Darby thinks about online learning from kind of three elements: design, guidance, and teaching. And that these kind of, that design and that teaching overlap in that middle period of guidance. And so that's kind of important to think about. I'm going to offer you some strategies today, and they are going, some of them are, we are going to say, gosh, this totally connects to how I want to build a relationship. And some of the things will kind of be more foundational and might have kind of a less explicit connection, but are still important to how we can build a relationship with our students. As a human developmentalist, I firmly believe, and I know in my bones from doing research and thinking and reading and thinking about this, that learning really happens in the context of relationships. When students see instructors as someone who is approachable, somebody that they can talk to, someone that can support them, and they feel safe and secure in the online learning environment, then more learning can occur. Flower Darby also offers us this framework as well. And in her book, she describes that when we're planning for online learning, we need to think about actually 3 relationships. And I think that most of us, at least this was true for me when I started in my online teaching career, I was really good at the first one, that I thought I was really good at kind of the things in which I could do where I could create a relationship with a student. So the things that I kind of would serve out to students, I would put announcements out there, I would share about myself. And then in reading Flower Darby's work, I realized what I needed more work on in the online learning environment was helping my students connect with me and also helping my students connect with one another. Those things came more easily to me in the face-to-face environment and less easy to me in the online learning environment. So I'm hoping to share with you kind of some nuggets that I've learned over the years, and I'm hoping that some of these things will really affirm some of the things you're already doing, and that you'll also learn kind of some small tweaks that you can make in your own pedagogy to support students and to kind of connect with them more. So I'm going to offer you some considerations. And some of these considerations will fit with you and your authentic teaching self and your program and your area of study. And those considerations then take away with you. And some of them might not fit with those things, and that's fine too. That's why I'm going to offer several considerations for you to think about. So the first one that I want to talk about is consider revising your syllabus. We know that first impressions matter, and I encourage you to research and think about creating an inclusive syllabus. Think about the ways in which you use language in your syllabus to invite students into the learning environment. Consider using video in your syllabus or visuals in your syllabus, adding a diversity statement, inviting students to share their preferred pronouns, and then also make sure your syllabus is accessible. So when I first started teaching, I had a pretty cut and dry syllabus. And over the years, I've tried different things out, and I've learned about what it means to have an inclusive syllabus. And one way that I've transformed my syllabus to be more friendly and user friendly as well is I've created an FAQ. This doesn't screenshot well from my LMS, but basically I've created a series of questions like, how will my learning be assessed? I'm new to D2L, which is our learning management system. Where can I get help? And I've used that kind of framework. Having that FAQ also helps shift my language to be more friendly. And I think, again, that first impressions matter and that's important. And on your handout, I have 2 resources to consider about how you can kind of revise your own syllabus with inclusion and belonging and welcoming in mind. And I encourage you to do that. I also encourage you to consider creating classroom norms with your students. This is something that I had done in a face-to-face environment years ago, and then kind of took a break from. And then now that I'm teaching online over Zoom, this semester, I tried it again after I did a training from an organization called AQ, which I'll talk about a little bit throughout this presentation. And it really helped me see the importance of creating classroom norms with your students. And so this didn't take too much time. I know time is always of essence when we have students in a classroom, whether it's Zoom or face-to-face. And I gave students like 15 minutes. I gave them a Google form. I put them in breakout rooms. And we just talked about like, what are some things that we need in this learning environment so that we feel safe and so that we feel heard. And so I took their considerations. I drafted some language. These ones are pretty kind of cut and dry. And what I learned from my students, and I think that's a key part here, that over the years, I realized that I need to learn from my students more and more because they often tell me what I need to be doing. And it was so interesting. I learned a lot about video usage. And I mean, nobody likes to come into a Zoom meeting or a classroom and just see those black boxes. Um, and I don't like it either. But my students really talked about how when they had their videos on when the instructor was lecturing, then they were just watching other people's videos and not the instructor. And that it helped kind of reduce kind of the commotion in their heads, the commotions in their houses when they can have the video off. And so my group came up with this idea that they would, when they were in their breakout rooms, most of them have their videos on, but when they're in the main session, when they're sharing and speaking, those that are comfortable put their video on so that we can see their faces. And so I don't think I would have thought about it in quite that way if I didn't ask my students. We've also been kind of revising these norms as we've gone throughout the semester if something needs to be added. So I'm going to take a moment to share two resources. These are excellent resources. If you don't know about AQ, I encourage you to learn more about AQ. These are two of the free resources that have been super helpful to me. The Back to School Toolkit has a lot of the things I talked about in how to do an inclusive syllabus. It'll also talk about welcome videos, welcoming students into the classroom. And then they also have a quick toolkit about 10 inclusive teaching practices. So I encourage you to check those out. This summer, I also took a paid course through them about creating equitable learning environments, and it was really, really powerful. But these free resources are a great start. So I think that this is going to be one of those strategies that you might think, okay, how does this connect to connections? But it really does. That people really feel most safe when there's kind of a predictable routine. And this is something that I've kind of brought with me from my early childhood teaching days as well. And so in my courses, I create a rhythm. And so I have these templates that I use. Like every week I have a game plan, and it looks a lot like what you see on your screen on the right, in that it's set up the same way. I use the same headings. I change out the information, but my students know that each week they can tend to know that on Thursdays at midnight, there's a quiz due, and then at Sundays, the rest of the discussion board and a weekly work due. And then of course, there's some big assignments that are sprinkled throughout the semester, but there's a consistency and a rhythm. And when students, the feedback that I get is that students always know what they can expect from me, and that's comforting to them. And when students feel safe, then that relationship and that trust grows. I learned some of these strategies, again, a shout out to Small Teaching Online by Flower Darby with James Lang. If you don't know about small teaching is this wonderful framework of what are these kind of small things that we can do where we don't have to transform our course, we don't have to transform our pedagogy, we don't have to transform our philosophy, but what are these small changes we can make that are going to have big impacts? And so I encourage you to check out that book. Another tip I have for you to build relationships and connection is to strive for transparency. That it's important that we're explaining why we do what we do. And I find that the more transparent and the more I explain my why to students, the more they trust me and the less questions I get, honestly. But also it just sets people up for success. So here are some things that I've done, and I don't do all these things in all my classes, but I wanted to share a kind of a myriad of examples for you in case one touches you more than another. So consider creating a video walkthrough of how your LMS works. I've learned that each instructor interprets how to set up their LMS in a totally different way, and that can be really confusing to students. So making a short video with a screen share and a voiceover can be really, really kind of high impact stuff. You also might consider, I've started sending out emails in my asynchronous course, kind of short and sweet emails to let people know how they can expect to get feedback from me. Again, I learned that each instructor does it differently. And so I let students know that here's the kind of feedback I give, rubrics. Sometimes I give general feedback. Sometimes I give individual feedback, and they can always find that in the grade book. And me taking those 2 minutes to be explicit about where to find that in an email outside of my FAQ and my course syllabus, which they read a million years ago, or maybe they didn't read, that can be really, really helpful. I've also learned that when I can explain in small ways why I designed the course the way I did, that puts students at ease too. Like, hey, there's a reason for this. There's a reason that there's a low stakes weekly quiz before a discussion board. It's because she wants me to understand the vocabulary before I go and use it. And so just kind of being really having that communication at a different level and letting students know the why. I also have done some work thinking about my assignment directions, and I've transformed those over the years to really include the why you're doing this and the skills that you're going to use. And then I've created kind of walkthrough videos of rubrics and how they work and how they can help students in their work. Because again, thinking about my students in particular from the ecological model, what I realized is that a lot of my students don't know how college works and don't know how to use the tools I've given them. And so being explicit in helping them know how to use those tools to their advantage can be really powerful. One resource that I recommend that if you're interested in learning more about that is the Tilt Higher Ed Framework. And they have wonderful suggestions in redoing assignments, helping students prepare for assignments, review after assignments, as well as rubric design. All right, this is a fun one. Provide opportunities for connection. And the strategies that I'm going to share are going to be some kind of low stakes ways, some ways that are connected with content, and some other ways as well. One of my first words of advice is let students see you. Last fall, I was reading my student feedback in an introductory course that I teach, and the student wrote, "You were the only professor that I knew what they looked like this whole semester." And I just thought, oh my goodness, that's sad. And it's because I'm kind of dorky and I use a bit emoji a lot, but I also I show myself. I send videos, I send sometimes pictures of my family. And it seems like a small thing, but like students in an online learning environment, like it can be very isolating. And so I encourage you to let students see you. I also encourage you to share a little bit about yourself. This is a little video I made in Canva. And I'll let it play while I'm talking. I share this out in all of my courses. And it's just, I kind of choose the things that I'm comfortable sharing and with my students, and just so they can, it kind of humanizes myself, that they can see me as a human that is someone that they can connect to. And so this is just a little bit about my background here. I made it using a free platform called Canva. And here are the things I love. French fries with ketchup, Netflix. And so I do encourage you to think about some low stakes things that you're willing to share and really capitalize on those. So for example, I really think it's important because I think boundaries are important, of course. So I don't share everything about myself and all my hopes and dreams and things like that. But like, I really like Snoopy. So I have one class that I am like, share Snoopy emoji, Snoopy memes all the time. And I encourage students to send them to me. And it's just kind of a really low stakes way to connect. I teach in child development courses. So I have a 4-year-old. I share about her a lot. I might share, like right now I'm sharing about her pumpkin carving process and how that connects to development. So think about the things that you might share that can really help you connect with students and make you seem like you're a human that's kind of on their side and that's kind of a regular person. Before I had a child, I shared about my dog a lot. I would use him in examples. I'd show funny pictures. And again, it didn't take a lot of showing all the depths of my soul with students, but it was something that we could connect over. I also encourage you to consider kind of sprinkling the course with occasional personal messages. Again, these can be about content or course related things about the grading process, how you get feedback. But if you're at a conference, like today you're at Trends, maybe you screenshot something and then you just share it out and say, hey, I'm at Trends today. I'm learning about this and it made me think of this class because, just so they can get a sense of your work outside of the course. And again, it helps them see you as a human. This was uh, when I shared at the beginning of the pandemic. Grace is my 4-year-old. She ran down the hallway with my textbook, and which I read a whole lot and was using a whole lot at the time. And she said, "Look, Mom, I found your favorite book." And so I just thought it was funny, and I wanted to share it with my students because, of course, it's not my favorite book, but from her 3-year-old perspective, it was the one I was always holding and looking at, and so it was important to her. So again, kind of share little nuggets of yourself that you're comfortable sharing. And consider inviting students to share about themselves as well. And I'm sure many of you are doing this already in your in breakout sessions at the beginning of a course. You might encourage students to share photos or images that represent them. One of my favorite things to do in my intro course is I use a tech tool called Padlet in the first week. And I encourage students to introduce themselves on there, and then they add a picture of themselves. And if they're not comfortable doing that, they add an image. So one student I will forever in my mind know as somebody who was kind of like waves of blue because that's what they chose to do. But again, it just kind of gives us a chance to kind of see each other because in an asynchronous course, we don't get to do those things. I've also started to take notes on students. And so I have a notebook. You could probably do this easily in a table on Word where I write down the students' names and then I write down information I've learned about them from their introduction or from their student information form. So I know who has a dog, I know who has kids and how old their kids are. And when those students email me or when we're connecting on a discussion board, I can kind of cater some of my responses to be a little bit more personal. I also encourage you to think about the power of consistent grouping of your students. So whether you do that in discussion boards or in an asynchronous course in breakout rooms, I call them learning circles, but I group students and so I often have classes of 30 people, but if I can group them into groups of 10 or even smaller sometimes, and they get to know that group of people over the course of the semester, that can be really, really powerful. It creates consistency and it helps them form relationships. And then I use those grouping for both kind of check-ins and also content-related activities. I also encourage you to use tech tools to form connections. So this is just a slide deck from a activity that I did in a breakout session. I love this idea of I'll create a Google slide deck, and then I have some slides that students actually type into during their breakout rooms. And at the end, I share the whole slide deck out, and it's like we created content together. And I just love that kind of almost like a metaphor of like there are some slides in our class slide deck from that synchronous session that are mine and some that have been created with students. And I think that that's kind of a powerful thing to think about. I also encourage you to make opportunities for asynchronous communication between the student and instructor. I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years now, so before the pandemic. I have moments throughout the semester, like when a unit ends, when I ask students to kind of summarize their learning so far. We know that from learning science that reflection and summarizing of learning and reflecting on that learning is a powerful way to cement knowledge. But also in these journals, I ask them to let me know how things are going and what's been most engaging so far in the course or things that they might change. And so do they take me a bit to get through and grade? Like they're a real low stakes assignment. They're worth about 5 points. Yes, they are, but I learn so much not only about my teaching and what's working, but also I learn a lot about what students are thinking about and what their needs are. And so I have a couple examples on here. And again, I'm asking them to kind of summarize their learning as well as let me know how things are going. And this is something that I've kept up with for 3 years, which is saying something because I'm someone who likes to try out ideas a lot. I also encourage you to provide choices for students. When I started letting students have a little bit more control over some of the things that they were doing in my class, it has paid off in big ways. Earlier, I was saying that my population of students tend to be at kind of varying levels in the field, and they bring different prior experiences about my content knowledge. And I'm sure that's the same for all of you, depending on your program. And so I have some students who are really seasoned and some students who are just getting into the field. And so I love that about my courses because the students really learn a lot from each other. They don't just learn from me, they learn from one another and how they share about things and the experiences that they have and the connections they make to content. But I've also found that when I can allow choices in what students are doing, that it helps students at different levels engage in different ways. So I do this thing that's called Choose Your Own Adventure. Maybe some of you remember that book series from like, I don't know, the 70s or 80s where you got to choose your own adventure. And like, it would say, if you choose this, go to page 74. If you choose this, go to page 33. So it's kind of a nod to that. I don't think my students know what I'm talking about, but it brings me joy to call them Choose Your Own Adventure. So on discussion boards often, and again, my discussion boards are kind of a social way to engage with a topic for students. And they've already read the resources, they've done a weekly quiz, they have baseline knowledge of a topic. And then I might say, okay, here's 5 different choices about brain development. You choose which one you care about and that you want to learn more about. And then you report about it on the discussion board. And so I have several choose your own adventures in my courses. And my feedback from students is that they love being able to go surfacey if they need to or in depth if they want to on a topic. And they really like that they can kind of jigsaw and learn from one another in these. And from a content end, like all the content's being covered, you know, so I don't have to worry about any of those things. And so it's a small thing that I've changed that it has had big dividends. I also give some choices when assessing students. Right now, I do it in kind of small, low stakes way. So on their discussion boards, I do invite them to either do a video or an audio or text. And specifically at the end of the week, they provide a lessons learned on their discussion board. Because again, I think that reflection really matters. And they can do that in 3 different ways. So a way in which that right now I'm exploring in really small ways how I can embed some of those universal design elements of learning into my courses. I'm not yet ready to, on big assessments, say, hey, you create a sculpture, you make a video, you make a paper. I don't care which way you do it, just do it. I'm not ready there yet pedagogically, but in small ways, I'm fitting it in. All right. I also encourage you to let students play and do. I know that many of you work in occupational trades, so in the medical field, so there probably is a ton of kind of lab time and hands-on learning, and that's awesome. And so probably the strategies I'm going to talk about are just things to kind of even layer on top that can really help students connect with the content. In my synchronous courses, I love using an interactive tech tool called Slido. You might know about Pollmaker, you might know about, let's see, Zoom has some polling techniques. I love Slido because it lets me do word clouds, open responses, multiple choice quizzes, and I can integrate it into my Google Slides. First, I started off with the free edition, but now I pay for it because I love it that much. And what my students report that they like about it is that they use their phone to participate, and they always have their phones. They're always, I can tell, are like sitting on their laps or sitting on their desks as they're zooming into my class. But students also like that it's anonymous. So I found when I was using like the chat feature in Zoom, then I know you can set it so you can't see students' names, but students didn't feel as comfortable kind of chatting in their responses. But if I do the same prompt on Slido and it's an open text response, we can't see who said what, and that makes students feel more safe. It makes them be better risk takers. I've also used it, sometimes we kind of do some, I use it kind of in positive ways. I mean, they're all positive ways, but the example I have here on the screen is we had a guest speaker and I wanted them to kind of send her off with some positive feelings. And so it was an open text Slido, and that they could type in anything they wanted, but they had to say what was the most engaging, what will stick with you, how did your presentation change or affirm your thinking? And so I really used it as an exit ticket. And so I love Slido for things like that. This surveys has been an interesting learning curve for me. I first started using surveys in my LMS. You can also use things like SurveyMonkey or Google Form. I first started using them connected to content, where I would say, hey, summarize Piaget's theory in 6 words, or summarize Vygotsky's theory in 6 words, and send it in, and I'll send out the best ones. And I get pretty good engagement on that because it's low stakes, it's quick, it gives me information about students, and it also, for those students who want to connect more, it gives them the opportunity to do so. But honestly, the surveys that I get the most response on are the silliest ones. Like recently, I asked, I gave students 4 choices of their favorite fall beverage, and 77% of my students responded to that survey, which I thought was incredible. I never get that high of response rates in my asynchronous courses for surveys. And again, I think it's just, that took me, I don't know, 5 minutes to set up, but it was an opportunity for students who wanted to kind of connect in some way with the group, feel like they're part of something, to have that. Also consider asking your students to be creative. Are there ways in which they can use materials at home to show what they know? And so this could be an exit ticket at the end of your synchronous call where you say, all right, grab a piece of paper and draw your takeaway. Or maybe you do it on a Jamboard or a shared whiteboard on in your call. I've asked students to design their an early childhood classroom with stuff at home. And one student used Minecraft and built an infant classroom using Minecraft and connected it to the discussion board post. I've had great luck with Play-Doh, where I might say, hey, if you want to do your lessons learned with Play-Doh, if you have Play-Doh at home or blocks at home, just build the main ideas and explain it. And it helps students kind of tap into that creative side. But it also, again, it cements that learning, because my goal is that you reflect. And if you do that in writing or Play-Doh or Minecraft, it doesn't matter to me. It's that you're reflecting and you're connecting with the content. And these are some fun ways to do so. Here's an example. I know this is a busy example, but that's how my screenshot just turned out, of using a tech tool called Padlet. And I'm sharing it because it's a kind of a high impact discussion board that I've designed, where I pose a problem that we're in a pandemic. Parents of preschoolers need things to do at home with their children. We're learning about fine motor skills and gross motor skills. And our job is to think about kind of really playful, open-ended experiences that people can do at home to promote fine motor and gross motor skills. And so I give them a couple blogs to consider with activities. And then my students go out and they do these things with either their mom and their dad, or their partner, or if they have a child at home, or they just do it with their brother or sister or a friend or a roommate, and they had to do a fine motor activity and a gross motor activity that you would do with a preschooler. And they love it. It's so fun to kind of see their photos coming in. I get so much engagement when I do things like this. And again, it's an example of how I'm helping students connect and see one another, but I'm also meeting my content objectives, where students leave this knowing the difference between those types of motor skills and why it's important to do open-ended experiences with children. So to kind of a resource share that I want to point out on the handout that I have is I put a series of really great faculty focus articles on there about being playful and active learning strategies that you can use hopefully in your discipline to meet this goal. And the last part of your handout that I wanted to highlight is that it's probably clear that I've been an educator. Education is something that's very important to me, and I love thinking about teaching and how we can teach not only young children, but our students in higher ed. And so I wanted to share with you these 5 recommended listservs that I get weekly or monthly, and then some podcasts that have been really important to kind of giving me lots of ideas. And so these are on the bottom of your handout, but Barbie Honeycutt is awesome. She does lecture breakers. It's now a podcast, and she has a blog. And she, again, I'm all about kind of small things with high rewards, and she'll do that. I recently came across Natasha Nurse Clark. She's a nursing professor, and she thinks about connection and course organization and kind of similar ways to what I presented, and she's a wonderful resource. There is a weekly listserv called Tips for Teaching Professors, and it's Brianna, and her last name starts with a B. I can't think of it right now, but she sends out really thoughtful ways about using technology and how to ask questions with students and how to really just kind of level up your critical thinking in your courses. And then I also love the T for Teaching and the Teaching in Higher Ed podcasts as a way in which to kind of propel your thinking about teaching forward. So I wanted to offer those to you. And my last piece of advice is that I know I threw a lot out at you, and this might seem ironic, but I really encourage you to keep things simple and sustainable. That try out one idea that I shared with you today, or one idea that you learned from the resources. It just takes one to kind of get you started. You don't have to do all the things at once. That's something that I've learned over the years. We don't have to do all the things. We should do the things that are authentic to our teaching selves and also our students and who they are. What will work for me in Lansing, Michigan might be different than what will work for my colleague who teaches at Cape Cod Community College and has a totally different population of students. I also encourage you to think about what your LMS can do and to reach out to your e-learning department if you have one. That the people who work at e-learning, at least at my college, are just on-tech resources, and they can really help you understand what the capabilities of your LMS are, and I've learned a lot from them. I also think it's important to think of what's authentic to you. If using Play-Doh makes you cringe and you would never do that, then don't do it. That's kind of how I feel about Flipgrid. Intellectually, I think Flipgrid is amazing. Flipgrid's a tech tool where students do like a video discussion board, but like I know my authentic teaching and grading self particularly, I know that I don't have the attention span to watch 60 students videos, even though I know that it's something that's an amazing tool for them. It doesn't fit with who I am as a teacher and the capacity of what I can do at the time. So I love Padlet because students can video, they can write a text, and they can do an audio, and I like that variety. So think about what's authentic to you and do those things. And also consider using tech tools. If there's I didn't mention too many tech tools. I mean, there's There's so many of them, but if you want to pop in the chat some tech tools that you have found helpful in your online teaching, please feel free to do so. And I know I don't have a ton of time, but I'd like to open up the floor for any questions or opportunities for you to share some things that have really worked in your courses as you've been exploring teaching in the online learning environment. Or think about any strategies that you've heard about from this presentation that you might try. Meeting with students one-on-one for major projects. I mean, I can definitely see how that could pay off. Any tips on getting veteran faculty who just do not want to use technology to become more engaged? Ooh, that is a big one, Sheila. Thanks for posing that question. Does anyone want to help answer that? Any tips on getting veteran faculty who just do not want to use technology to become more engaged? One thing that comes to mind is over the course of the last few years, we've been using some technology in our faculty meetings to kind of show how easy it is. I think that sometimes just having that comfort of using technology in an online format in a low stakes way with your colleagues can help you be more apt to use it with students. So that would be kind of one tip. Jennifer adds that side-by-side mentoring and demonstrating works well. It's another great tip. I have a colleague across the country who we are always saying, like, okay, when we can meet in person again, we're gonna do a Google Drive tutorial because she really wants to learn how to use Google better, and she knows that doing it over Zoom is just not going to work for her, and she wants that kind of side-by-side in-person mentoring when we're able. I also think kind of starting off kind of small. Sheila, if I had to recommend one, I might talk about even just using I'm not sure, Sheila, if your program uses WebEx or Zoom to do synchronous teaching, but using just the polls, the things that are already within the program and set up to use, that could be helpful. Darcy adds that it's a lack of time and creativity. Yes, it's hard. Like, it's hard to have the time to do all of these things. So those are some things that I would think about. Sorry, I hope I'm not missing anything in the chat. Any other questions or things that you're wondering? And I'm also happy to entertain questions or things that you want to know more about. I mean, I know I threw a lot at you, so feel free to email me. I'm happy to email more, talk more about these kind of things. Oh yes, Irene, some faculty explain their organization so students understand. Yep, and then you don't get many questions. I love that you said that. Do you know, when I've learned to explain my why to be super, super organized, I get less emails about the little stuff, and I get more emails about the big stuff that are more important, like engaging with content, like the fun emails where you're like, oh, people have ideas about these theories I'm talking about, and I get less emails about the mundane. And so, yep, it cuts down on my mundane email answering, but it also empowers students to be more independent. Pete adds that they've been piling a new tool, Packback. Oh, I haven't heard of that. An artificial intelligence discussion board, enjoyable and effective. We're starting with those who are interested and then kind of spreading it out. Very cool. I'll have to look that one up. I haven't seen that. There are so many tech tools out there, and the thing that I like about it is you can really cater it to kind of your own tech savviness, but also to your content. I have tended to, I've used several tech tools over the years, and I used to use more, and now I'm like really have streamlined, and I'm like a Slido user and a Padlet user. And that has saved me time and also just makes things more consistent for the students. And so I know that you'll find the tech tools that you love and are most comfortable with, and that can connect with your students and your content. All right, I think it's 11. I think that was my stopping place, right, Irene?
Yes, that is correct. So
Right.
I just, let's give Danielle a big round of applause. She did a great job, and I know that all of us are walking away with some great tips and creativity to infuse into our classes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go ahead and add my slide deck to that handout collection. It's called Wakelet. It's another tech tool that I use so that you have my slides as well, and you can link from there. But thank you for attending, and I hope you have a great weekend. I hope it's a little warmer where you are. I'm in Lansing, and now it feels like winter today. And we're headed up to Mullet Lake this weekend and to Mackinac Island, and it's going to be 46 degrees as a high. And I'm just a little nervous about that. But have a great weekend, everyone, and take care.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. Great tips.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful weekend. Dress warm. Make sure you got a windbreaker.
My gosh, I know. I had to pull out Grace's winter coat, and I'm like, does this winter coat even fit? So,
Yeah.
better. All right. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.